Sky One is dead. Or very soon will be. The company's owners, who if you're anything like me you have to keep reminding yourself are not Rupert Murdoch anymore but Comcast, have announced that the hitherto flagship channel will shut down at the end of this month, i.e. August 2021 if you're watching this in the near future. It's a mark of its exalted place in the network pantheon that it's being replaced by two new channels. One, Sky Showcase, will live at Sky One's old address and broadcast a curated selection of programming from across the Sky portfolio. If that's too clear for you, they've also claimed it will hero episodes of their most popular and acclaimed shows, because apparently hero is a verb somehow. The very freshest stuff, meanwhile, will go out on the also new Sky Max. With this decision, one of the last remaining links to the old Wild West days of British multi-channel TV disappears, possibly the last to remain reasonably intact. With Sky Movies and Sky Sports having evolved into many-headed hydra, services within a service rather than anything as mundane as mere channels, Sky News is the last of the original four left standing, and even that, like sports and cinema, is more of a service and a station in the old-fashioned sense. Sky One was a channel. It served no specific genre beyond entertainment, which could and did cover everything from game shows to sitcoms, to drama to cult science fiction. It was a broad church in an increasingly focused and targeted market. Comcast apparently didn't think that made sense anymore. But then was making sense ever really the goal? Sky One's origins lie in the functionally named satellite television, a channel set up in 1982 to broadcast via the newly launched orbital test satellite to cable operators around Europe. It was more of a proof of concept than a functional station, and after showing God knows what to almost literally no one at all for a year, Rupert Murdoch came along and bought the station for practically a fiver and some nice kangaroo leather espadrilles. Murdoch saw an opportunity in satellite television, albeit one that would take its time coming to fruition. Television freed of earthly laws and regulatory bodies that had so oppressed him in earlier terrestrial ventures like LWT. He changed the name to the more evocative Sky Channel, a slightly awkward phrase which illustrates how unusual such abstract names were in those days. This really was the future, complete with glossy CGI ident that actually made Channel 4 look dated when it debuted in 1984, with its scudding cloud backdrop and gleaming chrome. It wasn't actually watched any more than it had been, but Murdoch had deep enough pockets to keep it going regardless. It spent the next 4 years as a flashy but unremarkable cable network, while Murdoch worked behind the scenes figuring out how to make it the cornerstone of a media empire. After being turned down for the opportunity to create the first official British satellite broadcasting network in favour of BSB, he decided to do it anyway as an effective pirate, using the Luxembourgish Astra satellites to carry his all-new Sky television network, initially 4 channels: movies, news, sports, and the continuing Sky Channel, all with a fresh and modern new look. Though they considered keeping the on-the-nose scudding cloud backdrop, they instead went for something startlingly abstract and futuristic, with a circle motif inspired by the dishes you now needed to receive the things. Initially, they all had roughly the same format with a different ending. Sky channels had a neon handwriting font, very fashionable at the time. This identity for Sky Channel only lasted a few months before it was determined that pan-European broadcasting was too expensive, and the station and the rest of the service started transmitting to the UK and Ireland alone. With this change, Sky Channel became known as Sky One, and the idents got more dramatic Dutch angles. The new name reflected both Murdoch's ambitions for the network and the station's place in it, the centre of a sprawling television empire. That first year was a dicey one, with losses that even Murdoch's vast fortune had trouble covering. But as we all know, it finally ended with Sky victorious over BSB and set to dominate the market for the foreseeable future. To celebrate, and because it wasn't the 80s anymore, the Sky One logo was updated to replace the neon nightclub sign handwritten logo with something more powerful and capitalised.
This is Sky One, a part of the British Sky Broadcasting Network.
Everything hummed along until 1993 when the humming got louder. Now they were actually profitable, it was time to really turn the screw.
On September the 1st, television will change forever.
Murdoch and his equally evil henchman Sam Chisholm formulated a plan to switch to an entirely fee-based system. Up until then, Sky One was available free to anyone who had a dish, whether they subscribed to the rest of the Sky package or not. This was, of course, immoral to Murdoch's way of thinking, and so Sky Multi-Channels was born. A total of at first 12 channels bouncing off the Astra satellites were brought under the Sky umbrella, including several new ones, all for $6.99 a month, unless you got in early and grabbed a first month discount. In spite of an advertising campaign that inexplicably chose Stalin as a spokesman, it was a roaring success. They couldn't sell dishes fast enough. A whole new era of Sky had begun, and it needed a new look to go with it. Here's what you would have seen on Sky One for your £7. £12 if you wanted the porn channels.
From the Sky Satellite Network, this is Sky One.
Layered glass, shimmering CGI lights and vaguely Las Vegas-esque lettering in unself-consciously gaudy coloured Euro style. Unsurprisingly, this was created by an American design team, Novacom, who specialise in this sort of unsubtle but unmistakable thing. It was a badge of honour for Sky's newly cemented status as the predominant luxury item of its entertainment age. It didn't last especially long though. Just a couple of years later, Astra launched yet another new satellite, allowing Sky to expand still further, adding the likes of the Disney Channel, the Sci-Fi Channel and Paramount, among others, to their paywall, as well as preparing to expand into pay-per-view. Time, therefore, to freshen up, and gaudy day-to-day style symbolic ballets were out of fashion. This time Sky and the returning Novacom went with something classy and classical, solemn even, centred around a giant tombstone and silk curtains motif, with the station name appearing in friendly but antiseptic Franklin Gothic.
This is Sky One, part of the Sky Television Network.
An undeniably powerful, confident and even intimidating aesthetic, even if it's hard not to think of AIDS. All their stations, including some new ones, got a variation on this premise. Sky One's was purple, as if to symbolise its status at the centre of the empire. And this really was the imperial phase of Sky, with ITV tearing itself apart, Channel 4 searching under several layers of irony for its actual identity, and the BBC solid on screen but increasingly dysfunction fragmented off under John Burt. They could reasonably call themselves the country's biggest testicled television company. They reached 6 million subscribers in 1996 and celebrated by launching yet more channels, including for the first time a Sky 2, which saw Sky 1 officially become numerical.
This is Sky One.
Quite a fat number as it happens. This again didn't last long though. In 1997, Sky underwent another regeneration. One, the original Sky 2 didn't survive, on account of no one bothering to watch the poxy thing. By now, the era of Novacom perspex monoliths in swirly vortices, however they were presented, was very much over, and fashions favoured two-dimensional symbology, with relatable live-action footage mixed in. So the newly reverbalised Sky One went with a strangely absurdist get-up that seemed to involve peering unnecessarily closely at ordinary things. It wasn't completely terrible, but there was no coherent premise or theme that could be discerned, and the Sky One logo it was the ugliest it ever had. What's worse, this unprepossessing visual aesthetic was repeated across the network, and no one liked it. It was all a bit vague and limp. With the next great leap forward, digital television, right around the corner, the image-conscious Sky didn't want another potential million subscribers to be greeted by that mess. So after barely 7 months, it went out the window, along with the whole idea of a dish-shaped logo, although they did keep it as a swoosh for a bit. And the channel's rebranded yet again. This time, Sky let their channels forge their own identities, without worrying about brand coherence, outwent looming edifices of any kind, in favour of a simple square outline over equally simple live-action footage of nice things. The sort of thing all channels do now, or did until abstraction came back into vogue a couple of years ago, but with the exception that they were doing it almost first. Not actually first, that was Channel 4, but almost. This was the Sky One that greeted adopters of digital television, from any provider as well. Sky One was back free to air, for at least as long as it took for Sky to murder the opposition, which actually didn't take very long at all. Still, this look lasted longer than any other up to that point, except for the original, and even that was tampered more as the fonts and name changed. It was 2002 with widescreen on the way before the channel was regenerated again. Now with the Sky logo, newly pointy and dishless front and centre, Sky One was decked out in international orange. So very orange. The idents themselves tended towards the usual generic entertainment imagery, usually in live action, that most channels were using by now, but no one else was doing it quite so orangely. After 2 years, all that vitamin C started to get to them, and for the first half of 2004, they tried something vaguely classy, all textured and blue, with a big vertical line a quarter of the way through the screen, for no reason, except that it provides a weird sort of structure. Anyway, it didn't take, so they hired Swedish animators Cactus Film to change the logo into this ugly bugger, and provide some bizarre, quasi-symmetrical tone poems in colour schemes so off-putting it must have been deliberate. Despite seemingly being made for the colourblind, these idents also lasted a good long while before Sky decided to tee its portfolio up again in 2008, once again spelling Sky One as a number. I'm not sure everybody at the company knew that was going to happen though, because that February Sky One had already received a new aesthetic. Same logo, but now the idents were whooshing CGI ballets in blue and chrome. But let's hope they didn't spend too much on it, because like I said, by August 2008 it was all change, the biggest since 2002. Sky One was a number again. But this time they did it better. Live action combined with creative animation and a solid icon so central and powerful, they didn't even use the Sky logo at the time. The only thing I might change is to speed them up a bit. Too much build-up. I know it's so the announcer has time to speak, but to my mind, logo should be complete before or shortly before they start. Identify the channel before announcing the programme. The practice these days is to wait until last second, using the channel identity itself as a punchline. But I don't like that approach. So yeah, these are great. If they were all like this, with the simple format of crystals, I'd like them even better. But the 21st century demands cross-promotion and extra tinsel. But either way, in the Crystal One, Sky had a stronger central icon than BBC One has had for decades now. Which of course means that it only lasted 3 years before being replaced by something duller.
From the writers of The Sopranos, Tom Selleck is police commissioner and head of a family of cops in Blue Bloods. Starting tonight.
At first, it looks like generic live-action footage with a logo on top, barely distinguishable from anyone else's idents at the time. Then you notice the reflective numeral 1. It's an interesting idea, but nothing is done with it. Sticking it in the background just means it gets lost and comes across as an infinitely blander version of the previous look. Not that anyone really cared. These were the longest serving Sky One idents of all, lasting from 2011 to 2016.
Well, if you think Brian
After that, there was a disturbing sort of series of existential animations where the figure one was trapped in a bare white room attempting to smash his way free, occasionally tormented by coloured paint or rubber balls. It felt more appropriate for a children's channel, really, albeit maybe one with disturbed children. Anyway, this got pretty old after a year, and so the figure one was taken to live on a farm where it could run around all day. While Sky One, regaining those 3 letters, took on what would turn out to be its last look, and its simplest, barely creeping up to 2 dimensions and only sporting 2 colours, white and, appropriately, sky blue.
Officer, it wasn't me.
It gets the job done, but it can give you a bit of a headache staring at all that cobalt. Especially when they updated it in 2020 with a new set that replaced the white with even more blue. These are the very last ident Sky One will ever use. Unless Showcase and Max fail to bring the name back, which I'm not betting against. But let's just assume otherwise for now. It's been publicised in the Radio Times at least as a mere renaming. Certainly the schedule not changing a huge amount. And for that part, Sky are barely acknowledging the change on screen. Just an hour-long launch programme for the new station, or new name as the case may be, and nothing at all to actually acknowledge the demise of Sky One. Even Wikipedia is planning to just rename the article and move on. But I for one can't see this as a mere rebranding. It's the One, or the lack thereof. If BBC One reverted to something less specific, BBC Showcase, people would see that as an ending, as much as or probably more than a mere alteration. It's the definitive nature of the One, suggesting that while the other channels might have served one genre or service or medium, this one did everything. This was the main one, the molten core at the centre. No wonder it takes 2 channels to replace it. In a sense, in becoming Showcase, it's not just changing its name, it's abdicating. More than that, perhaps, this might be the beginning of the end for the idea of the television station as we know it, and have come to know it through nearly a century of development. For decades, we sorted our television channels by operator and then by chronology, because there were so few of them. BBC One and BBC Two, then ITV, then Channel 4. Then Sky. Then Channel 5, and the numbers are already failing us. And then the floodgates open, streaming posts its in, schedules start to lose all meaning, the television set itself becomes largely irrelevant. Maybe channels, as we know them, are next for obsolescence, as anything more than categories under which you might find certain programmes. Categories for which mere numbers are no longer sufficient as identities. It's unlikely to happen before society itself collapses, however, so I wouldn't worry about it.
I've been Stalin. You've been wonderful. Thank you and good night.